Hey, any of you come back yet? How you doing? This is Robin Swan with Firebird Touch Therapy, and we have been doing these little broadcasts live because for me personally, I want to get as much correct information out into the airways and the algorithm as I possibly can. I'm here in Southern California, so I'm in the heart of the cannabis industry. I've been in it for my entire life. I've been a licensed cannabis business as I choke on that, because do you really need a license to sell cannabis? I mean, like, I don't have a license to sell tomatoes or romaine lettuce, and people are dying from romaine lettuce. So anyways, and then, other people call me and say crazy things that they're doing with cannabis and ways that they're using cannabis medicine that are just completely contraindicated to what you should be doing. So over here at Firebird, we are just really about education and elevation. So we feel that the more information we can give you, the better you can go out into the marketplace and choose what you need. Because it's a really wild, wild west scenario right now, and we don't really know, like, you can't just, the vetting process is still happening. I am here today with a really amazing woman. Maybe you remember this from our radio show, I Support Cannabis Because, or Cannabis Medicine Helps Treat My. Now, Felicia and her partner from myhealthfreedom.com and Cannabis Patients, you can find them on Instagram, have been working at collecting 1 million of these. Okay, you can go to the website and you can download one for yourself, and you could run around your community or even post it yourself, because even though we have some states that have legal cannabis and now we're having a recreational conversation, the fuckery has not ended. Okay, in fact, it's just begun. So the more advocation that we can do, advocation, that's a word, right? Advocation that we can do for ourselves, the better we're going to be able to regulate the environment that's coming, as opposed to allowing the lawmakers to just go ahead and tell us what we can and can't do and how many milligrams we need for our medicine. So remember, I support cannabis because I'm sure you support it. If you use it or you know someone else who uses it, then you've seen the amazing medicinal qualities of it. You can go to My Health Freedom at Cannabis Patients, Cannabis_patients on Instagram. Look for this. But I want to introduce you right now to Felicia Carbajal, who has come all the way from LA, straight out of where were you?
Hall.
City Hall. That's right. This girl was just at City Hall, and she drove all the way down here to be with us so we can talk about the legislation and how things are changing in the cannabis industry. Now, you and I were both not very friendly to the Prop 64, which turned our fantastic 215 patient advocate license laws into recreational nightmares. So you used a really awesome term when you came in today to tell me what you were about, and that was?
Well, right now I'm advocating for this broader understanding of what compassionate cannabis 2.0 looks like. So what does it look like to have the health justice, economic justice, social justice, and environmental justice all under one umbrella? So, like, what does it look like to make us come together as a community? Because like you had pointed out, there are powers against us in particular that are
Correct.
preventing people from having access to this plant as medicine, from
Right.
having access to this plant as opportunity, from having access to this plant as a way to heal ourselves from the harms of the war on drugs. So I was at City Hall earlier today because I'm one of the Los Angeles advocates pushing for social equity and community reinvestment and this broader lens.
Picture. Right. Let's talk about that. I love that term, social equity. I don't think that we really have I didn't really have a great understanding of those two words together until you said them out loud. You know, how we come together as a community creates equity, which is, power.
Well, right now, there's a lot of conversations when we talk about equity, because most people will ask me, well, Felicia, what does equity mean to you? And I'm like, well, in the blanketed statement, well, equity means that in terms of a blanketed statement with industry, well, equity means that there should be as many women participating in this space
Right.
as men, because, well, that's just the dynamic of numbers. So when we look at it in terms of cannabis, we have to weigh in other equations. So we have to weigh in respecting the people who created the space. which, figuring out what does that look like, to have legislation that ensures that patients have access to medicine. And then more importantly, and we're seeing this slowly roll out, and from the state level and the federal government talking about what does it look like to actually create programs that create socially equitable enterprise so that communities who've been impacted can participate as well. So it's
impacted as in arrested, as in targeted, as in we're growing weed all over our neighborhood.
Well, I think it's all of that. So primarily we know that communities of color were the ones that were impacted the most with arrests. Now we also know that extenuating policies were created after that continued to penalize communities of color. So it was almost as if, we don't want to talk about racism, sexism, any of those things as we're developing this industry, but they're all a part of the shift that we're putting into place together.
And we're coming from, the OG market is how long since 1932, 34, we've been in prohibition until just now. So there's a structure of power within the cannabis industry that has nothing to do with legislation. So,
well, it has to do with, like you said, power. So what typically has been power in the world right now? It's people who have money.
Right.
It's typically white men, older white men in particular. Now we're seeing a lot more politicians.
Yeah, like that guy, what's his name? John Boehner? Yeah, oh, bad. Oh, but hey, John, can you do us a favor and can you go download one of these signs and write on it, I support cannabis because I make money, motherfucker, okay? Can you do that for me, John? I'd appreciate it. I'll put it on my Facebook page if you do.
Well, for him to just be honest, because one of the big questions people are asking me is like, well, what would you ask John Boehner? And I was like, well, I just want to know, are you double dipping? Like, are you pulling money from your cannabis enterprise while you're simultaneously funding private prisons? I'm just curious.
I'm just curious about that. Yeah, seriously. So what is going to happen to somebody who's invested in private prisons, which I personally think is criminal in itself, that prison should not be.
Well, nobody's raising that level of consciousness right now. So right now, that's why when we talk about social equity, we're talking essentially about what kind of affirmative action programs are we putting into place.
We're talking about how we're going to structure the growth of this industry, because
and what do reparations look like surrounding this largest? I was at a panel in Skirball.
Skirball?
Last year.
That's
Skirball,
a place?
it's a museum.
Okay.
In Los Angeles. It's called the Skirball Museum, and I was sitting on this panel, and there was this woman at the end. We're all cannabis industry people. And the woman at the end talked about the largest transfer of generational wealth. So like right now, what we need to start challenging is, okay, not mad at you. I'm not upset as somebody who grew up poor and who comes from people who've systematically been abused. I'm not mad. I know there are good white people in this world. I've met them. They're few and far between oftentimes. It's unfortunate. But then there's also with everybody.
Right.
So what does it look like in terms of, okay, you got that generational wealth. Do you recognize, what is your acknowledgement in terms of the policies that have been put into place that have made you be able to have all of that wealth? And what are the systematic effects on communities of color in particular? Because without a give back, and you're saying you're going to make all kinds of money in cannabis, it's a slap in the face to communities of color who carried the brunt of the punishment.
Correct.
Who carried the brunt of the punishment. I'll just say it one more time.
Yeah.
Like, the life sentences that have been allocated to
for
people.
under a pound of cannabis.
Yeah,
there's so many. I take this conversation very personally because I come from a generational cannabis family of mixed breed people, and almost all of the men besides my father, in my life have been incarcerated for cannabis. And now there's a whole generation of people who are coming up who don't understand that part of this industry and the sacrifices that were made, and it wasn't, people who grow cannabis historically are usually families who are farmers.
Yeah,
they're just family farmers. So, Humboldt County was built on family farmers. And
a lot of the industry, I mean, if you look at it, because I live in Los Angeles and I'm originally from Fresno, so if you just know historically the land area and what has been cultivated just in the area since the 1600s and that evolution into the 1900s, that you realize that, like, wow, why aren't we talking about all of these amazing farmers who've been able to grow inside, grow outside for
phenogenerate
for
all
hundreds,
the seed generations,
for hundreds of years. So, like, what does that look like to actually? For me, it's like, how do we challenge thought? So, what are you going to do to empower these people who have been marginalized and who are being tossed out of
You're
the
having
space?
these conversations in government, like you're asking people, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to do it? Yeah. And what kind of responses are coming back to you?
Everybody is kind of just shrugging their shoulders. I don't think they want to acknowledge that they have some pork belly funding that they could just pull from, or some failed programming that is no longer, that is just sitting there. That, I mean, nobody wants to acknowledge that there is a bunch of wealth, not just surrounding cannabis, but in general, that sits in government that needs to be allocated. So that's the conversation that we're having right now. It's just like.
And what does that look like for you in Los Angeles County? Like, how are you guys going about that conversation? Because Los Angeles historically has probably more arrests per capita than anywhere else in California of people of color around drugs.
We have 220,000 people in Los Angeles City and County who could benefit from the expungement process that hasn't really taken into place because of those crimes. Now, the majority of them are Black, brown, communities of color, low-income communities. So, and that comes, to explain to people like, hey, I know communities of color that every creed of people, because it was just poor people who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, and we figured out how to be family because we knew that the only way we were going to survive is together. So that's one of the things that in the city of Los Angeles that we're working on in particular is like, how do we have these communities that we all have different wants, different needs, different hopes, different desires surrounding this conversation of what does equity, justice, and repair look like? But okay, what does it look like to still come together and have these conversations and support one another and figure out what this collective responsibility to one another looks like? So I think that's afforded us a unique opportunity in the city of Los Angeles to say, we're going to come together. So we're at that point right now, and we've been pushing the conversation for them to fund a social equity program. So we're still asking, begging. Like, I mean, I've had to, we sent you the digital copy, okay, you've got the e-copy, okay, that wasn't enough for you, perfect. Felicia's going to hand them all out.
How has it been, what is the difference for you since 64, since Proposition 64 has come in, like, as far as, all the advocacy that you're doing?
My crystal ball was correct when I said in front of City Hall a couple of years ago that the conversation of social equity was being utilized as a Trojan horse to get a regulated market. So I think what we've found was just the truth, that this was never about patients or ensuring that patients were still going to have a right, that people who fought for, that the Constitution, we have to remember that part of Prop 215 afforded us constitutional rights that are somehow now being...
now they're gone.
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry. I know I'm making noise with my little microphone because I'm wearing this like insane fetish necklace. Is that better? Yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
So I mean, we're dealing with a lot of.
So how is that playing out? Like, what is that? I mean, our crystal ball was cracked. You're right. So now we have all these people who are disenfranchised, and now we have all these patients who are disenfranchised, who can no longer get the medicine they were getting from their 215 providers because they don't have the money. They're small little artisan.
And there's no 215. There's no tax incentives. Like, how many of us pay taxes on prescription drugs?
Right.
It's nominal. I mean, it's very minimal, but nobody's taking into account that. Nobody's remembering. Like I said, I didn't vote no on Prop 64. I didn't vote yes.
Okay.
I just didn't vote. I just didn't vote because as a human being, I was just so conflicted. Because when I would sit in these rooms, I was like, okay, sell me. Literally sell me on the idea of, because I believe legalization in this plant should be freed. So sell me on why these 64 pages of legalese in
Of
particular.
rhetoric, right.
Legalese, rhetoric. Explain to me how this is, why I should support this. And when they would come up with, oh, well, this is how we're going to heal some of the harms by removing convictions from people's records, and now we're still seeing bullshit. You know,
Right.
like I'm dragging my feet. Jackie
Right.
Lacey
It's not
doesn't.
happening.
And I mean, when we look at it in terms of people were telling me, well, in San Francisco, those 9,300, and I was like, okay. The 9,300 became a necessity, and it was also a testing ground because 9,300 is nothing in comparison to the
9,300 people.
9,300 people in San Francisco. The district attorney is going to wave their magic wand and make those convictions go away.
Okay.
And they're doing it because only 50 some people had participated prior to them waving their magic wand in a record sealing expungement type process. So, you know, it's like explaining to our government that, like, hey, we need to let people know what's really going on. Like, when we talk about communities of color that have been impacted, we're not talking about people who can articulate or who typically fight or who have trust in the government and what you're saying. So they're not plugged in and tuned in, because if they were tuned in, those 9,300 people should have been at that door demanding their freedoms back, demanding the 4,800 rights and responsibilities that they lost as American citizens. But nobody knows because we're not educating communities of color, and we're continuing to disenfranchise them surrounding this conversation and all of the things surrounding criminal justice reform too. It's for me, it was frightening. So that was my big thing with Prop 64 was like, I was like, okay, so I'm a member of the Latinx community. So I was like, how are you including my people? Oh, you're not? Oh, we're not having these conversations. Oh, like, I lost interest. I'll wait and see what happens. And we knew what was happening. I mean, we tried to rally a few of the patients, but part of the reality is people had been working. This is what they were doing to survive, to live, to put shelter and food in their bellies.
Feed their kids.
So to be able to transition like that so fast and advocate for yourself, lobby for yourself, have to learn everything, learn policy.
Well, and when you've been arrested, you're not really designed to go out and advocate for yourself, because your experience has been that when you speak up for yourself, you go down.
Well, some of us, I mean, I've been impacted by the justice system, and I'm like, you're not going to shut me up. I mean, I will ride whatever line I have to in particular so that I ensure I love my freedom.
Right.
I love my freedom. So, but at the same time, I think there's just this new evolution of people.
You're very rare in that, you know.
I know there's a lot of us.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Do you think just in the cannabis industry, there's a lot like
the
cannabis
and
industry
social
are just like
justice?
more like loud about it?
No, I mean, I think because, you know, when I tell somebody that I'm organizing around gender, social, economic, environmental, and health justice, it, you know, it's this really big lens. And when we're talking about like how many intersections and how many people who've been system impacted or not cross all of those, because at the end of the day, when we're organizing and we're just trying to make our people be awake, it's about like, how do we see each other's humanity in one another? You know, like nobody's talking about just the basics. I always tell people, and I was reminded today because I didn't really want to organize when we were headed back into City Hall to walk the floor with all of the council members' offices, and there's like 40 people, and I was reminded, like, Felicia, you have 72 first cousins. Get it to, you know, like,
wow.
like just.
You're like my guy.
Yeah, like, so it's, you know, how do we come together? How do we figure this out? How do we move forward?
72 first cousins.
And I tell people, I walk into a room like I've got my 72 first cousins, like right shoulder to shoulder, we're coming in.
So do people reach out to you when they're, you know, when they've been impacted by the law, or?
Oh yeah.
And then are they looking to you for legal, like assistance
No,
with
I think
legal? Or?
I don't do any of those things, but I'm a resource, and people from the community who ask for help and they have like a sincerity. I don't know. I have to sniff them out, I guess, and if they don't make my skin crawl or make me sweaty or give me the bad vibes, like I'll go out of my way to introduce them to opportunities. I met a gentleman today that he attended our expungement clinic that we did for National Expungement Week, and he's like showing me all his papers, and he's got his record cleared. And today he spoke. He spoke about wanting to have the same opportunity as everybody else, and he's somebody who actually was incarcerated. And this was the first time of, I mean, he attended the event, and evidently I met him. He like remembered me, and it was definitely my event, but there was so many things going on, and it was just, you know, like proud mama right here. Like, okay, yeah, he took advantage of the opportunity being given to him. And now he's coming and he's doing his due diligence.
So what about the, you know, the street, the OG market? Let's just call it that. You know, do you think
we're
that we're
including
gonna
them?
We're including them?
Yeah, I mean,
that's included.
right now I'm working with Freeway Rick Ross. So if we're not
Freeway Rick Ross. Wow.
He's
you gotta like put that in the feed. You gotta find out who Freeway Rick. I can't even say that. Is he
Rick Ross?
Is he as fast as that? That's like it's like a limerick. Freeway Rick Ross.
He's somebody who opened up large distribution channels during the 80s, and he was also in bed with the CIA and during
like
a lot of
my kind of guy.
He probably is. He's a really
like
cool guy.
My kind of guy.
But I mean,
so you're working with him how? Like,
well, we're working with Indica, so he's on the board of Indica. So he's bringing.
And what is Indica?
Indica is the National Diversity and Inclusion Cannabis Association. So
what an awesome name! Can you? Yeah, we're gonna drop a link for that in our feed.
And it's like NDICA, but they're an organization. So we have a broad coalition that includes labor, community organizations.
So is he kind of like the connect to the OG street? Like is he like, hey, I know how to go out and, you know, have this conversation and this all this backwards
CIA
kind of
gave
way?
him the crack to flood the city of Los Angeles.
Is there a movie about him?
Yes, there is.
What's the movie?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I'm not his person. I just know he's a cool dude, and we want to make sure, in particular, that the OGs aren't forgotten in this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that they're not only are they not forgotten, they don't necessarily want to get off the street. And if you look at what's in the dispensary and what's on the street, by far what's on the street is superior to what's in the dispensary.
Sometimes, but sometimes we're starting to find, especially after some of the exposés, that some of the people who have decided to open up shops that maybe aren't those OGs, but that are just doing it, that are participating in the illicit market, that there's a lot of contaminants. There's a lot of stuff that we
on the street. Yeah.
That we as people who want to make sure that, you know, if somebody says that, oh, all cannabis is medicine, well, it's not medicine if you're putting pesticides in it. It's not medicine.
Right, and let's stop there because that's a really good point, because I was having an issue with the whole, the testing is outrageous for us now, right? And I was brought to my attention that the testing is actually great because it is cleaning up the street. There's a lot of people who grow indiscriminately and use a lot of chemicals during their grow
I'm sad
to get more weight. So.
And I'm sad that they're going to be penalized, but they're still participating, and I also don't have a lot of fucks to give if you're going to be flooding the market
with garbage.
Right. Like, it's kind of like, oh, come on, man. Now you want to tell me that you're working for patients? Oh, yeah, right. I mean, you're just as bad as some of the Prop 64 people.
Right, and now there's a fake cannabis rolling around the market, so be careful, people, on that. This fake weed. And one of my clients, a friend of theirs, had gotten a hold of a synthetic CBD, and the woman ended up in the hospital. So, you know, source is still crucial.
Well, I mean, people just think because they hear CBD.
Right, it's good.
Oh, all CBD is good.
All CBD is good.
Nobody's recognizing that, no, not all CBD is good.
Right.
Where did it come from? Like, nobody's asking those questions.
The only thing that CBD is an acronym for cannabinoid. And I think that that's really what we just need to, when people are like, CBD, 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 what does that mean?
I want to tell people, when it's a hemp CBD, it's the lowest common denominator. It is your health supplement for a healthy person.
Right.
And you still want to know, like, was it grow?
Did it grow
GMOs?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, did Monsanto take a spray over it? Or
right.
Did the Miracle Grow people, Scott's Miracle Grow, who are in bed, like all of these, you know?
And back to John Boehner, our dear friend, right? So the more we see the upper echelon, you know, the 1% get into
he wasn't the 1% until this. So when he left office in 2014, he was only worth like $3 million 3 point some odd million. So he knew that he was going to utilize his political affiliations to continue to corrupt our government utilizing cannabis now. That this is, people can give him money.
So you don't think that John just had like an epiphany, like someone gave him some hardcore cannabinoids and he had, you know, like
Are we
a come
talking
to
about
Jesus
the same
moment?
sexist, misogynistic, homophobic, xenophobic, policy signing and writing John Boehner?
I believe that's the man.
Okay,
Yes.
well,
Okay. I just wanted to be sure that we're on the same page.
We're on the same page.
You know, I'm hopeful for humanity. I always want people to have epiphanies and you know, wake up and die right. Yeah.
That's not to say that he didn't have some medicine or somebody close to him was positively impacted by cannabis, but at the end of the day, my first question is...
Right. How much money are you making on that transaction?
Former Speaker of the House, are you double dipping? I don't even care about how much you're making, because we know you're making a lot. I just want to make sure that you're not double dipping while you're pushing what the new normal looks like in cannabis, that it's white male, still the same bullshit.
Yeah, which is so crazy that that's it. Like we were talking about I was just in Las Vegas and how the whole cannabis industry is just, you know, older, creepy ass white men. Why do you guys have to be so creepy? Just tell me right now. Why? Why do you got to hang out with 20-year-old girls who aren't dressed? Why?
You don't have to be creepy either.
You don't have to be creepy. Be cool.
Yeah, just be
cool.
nice. Don't have to over-sexualize. Like I always like to laugh because I was like, obviously you were never cool.
Yeah,
so let's start with, we know that you were never cool. People probably picked on you in high school or junior high. So let's go back to there. Let's get you some healing so that you don't have to be an obnoxious prick as we move forward.
Right, and that's really what I feel that you're really about with all of your platforms. You know, this and where you're at now with the Equity for Social Justice. You know, it's all about that healing thing. It's all about like getting everybody to the table to realize that this plant, this cannabis plant, is here for our use to help us.
And it's not just so all of the derivatives of the plant. So we look at it in terms of I was telling people, gosh, I thought you were a capitalist. I thought you'd be smart, hemp people. If you're really, truly smart, you'd be getting hemp as part of the New Green Deal. Because technically it should be a part of the New Green Deal. So
exactly. So why are we not doing that? And now we can, now we can grow hemp, but we're still we're not growing it at the level that we need to be industrializing it. So we can have hemp rope and hemp oil and hemp cars and hemp
heal our
house.
Soil, heal our atmosphere.
Right.
Like these are the things that we're not talking about that make it part of the New Green Deal. Because when we're talking about how are we going to make a sustainable world, you're talking about it with all of the byproducts. But I'm just talking about what does it look like in the middle of nowhere to have fields and fields of CBD that are healing our atmosphere.
Right. Because I don't know if you guys understand this, but when you put cannabis in the ground, it cleans the soil. So whenever they plant hemp, it actually literally goes into the ground and does its good work, and it cleans the soil. So I think they did it in Japan during the nuclear waste spill in Russia
as well.
Chernobyl,
China, all of these places.
So why are we not doing that just here on our own soil in America? It's so much.
Because it's a commodity now.
Because now we're going to sell you CBD, which is an acronym for a cannabinoid. That's the takeaway for me today.
And how much money can we make on it?
How much money? Yeah, right. Because I think that Mary Jane herself, cannabis, just regulates the market herself. Because she put herself under the ground in prohibition.
Right.
You know, she just said, y'all are just not getting it. I'm just going to go to sleep for a while and let you grow up and mature and see what I'm really about. And the
indigenous people are still going to continue to utilize it.
Right. Exactly. And we're still going to do what we have been doing for 10,000 years, because that is the way that my grandmother taught my mother, who taught me how to do it. Exactly.
And because the earth was always going to give us everything that we needed.
And the earth will continue no matter how you try to take us out. Anglos, right? It doesn't happen that way.
It doesn't. To remind people, I think I make people uncomfortable, especially in Southern California, when we start talking about the indigenous people here in particular. For me to say, hey, my ancestors are indigenous to the desert Southwest. My great grandfather was born in Arizona, right before Mexico had lost the war. So just in that tiny, tiny, tiny window, but all of this was the same land. It was the same indigenous people who had lived there. It was the same indigenous people who were stripped of their culture and forced to cultivate hemp and work and build the missions. It's the same people who were raped by the Spanish. You know, so it's those same people that are indigenous to this area. So it's kind of the slaps in the face where you're not acknowledging communities in particular who are indigenous to this area and their responsibility to what it looks like to be able to participate in the conversation.
Right. We are the indigenous people of this land called Turtle Island. It is our responsibility to be the caretakers of it. And I also feel that it is our job to educate all the people on the back of Turtle Island to care for it. And you know, like we talked about how planting hemp just restores the soil, and you know, using cannabis as a way to create business in diverse communities like the LGBT and you know, like women of color. Are there any like women of color owned cannabis businesses?
Yeah.
And are they rocking it? And can you name one?
I mean, a lot of them are still struggling. So one of our friends is the first woman of color to get approved by the state to have an event license. And she's still struggling in terms of investment, in terms of just those basic things, because oftentimes those aren't big components of
and
how...
this is the crux of where the cannabis industry is going to fail us all, because it is becoming driven by money, just like that, you know, because if I'm a grassroots person, I don't care if my skin color is green, I cannot come up against somebody who is a multimillionaire who can just wipe me out in a blink
and that's
of an
what's
eye.
happening, because nobody's wiping anybody
happening.
out. People are just, how much money so that I can buy out your interest. It's not wiping you out. You still get to walk away.
Well,
and you're still going to win.
Are you winning, really? When you take a buyout on a product that you've spent 10 years developing and they write you a check for, let's say they give you a 4-digit check. You get $100,000 or $200,000 for your thing. And then they take your hard work and they turn it into a $1 million product.
But for some people, they're jumping at that opportunity. It's unfortunate. It really is. It also goes with not having the same skill set to be able to operate in businesses, so being taken advantage of as communities
and that's
of colors.
kind of what you're trying to accomplish, is create those opportunities for those people, so they
create the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So we're just pushing the city, like, hey, create some kind of a social equity program that encompasses those technical assistance that we need, that also includes worker rights, that's also making sure that there's education being developed, that's also making sure that you're tracking the arrest records, that you're also keeping count.
So are you working then with that to get done? Is that part of what you're doing, is creating those conversations with legislative bodies?
Well, right now we're working on the city of Los Angeles, and I've recently been appointed to the ADEM, which is the California Democratic Central Committee, or the Democratic State Central Committee. Yeah, that's what it is, the Democratic State Central Committee. So I'm hoping to be afforded the opportunity, like, there's going to be nothing in between us now. We're all peers.
Right, you're all together.
For 3 days.
So are you looking at creating, like, maybe some kind of buffer in the licensing costs, or like
all of those things are already in place. So we know
they are, because I didn't bump into any of them.
In the city of Los Angeles, they're in play right now, and that we know that
so
the state.
if you're an underprivileged person and you want to have a cannabis business in the city of Los Angeles, you are afforded the opportunity to have help with getting that done.
You're afforded the opportunity to get in line and wait for them to fund a program to give you help. So we're trying to push for them to fund an actual program that affords these people this opportunity to participate. But that's also the broader lens of what does it look like to have community reinvestment. So what does it look like to actually empower the nonprofit organizations that aren't working in cannabis, but that are working in these marginalized communities in particular, to provide those services, to be the bridge. So I mean, me personally, I hope to be one of those bridges, especially in the community that I live in. Because I do live in privilege. Like when people ask me, well, where do you live? And I'm like, oh, I don't live in the barrio, but I'm doing all of my work there because, well, I know what my responsibility is as a person who does get to have a little bit of perceived privilege. Like to tell somebody,
if you have a roof, clean water, food and clothes, you have privilege.
And I have more than that.
Yeah. Oh,
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I have more than that. So with that kind of, there's a lot of responsibility, and I take that seriously to ensure that people who don't have what I have.
I think that's where being our brother's keeper comes in. So I'm just curious, are there any questions from anyone on our?
Yeah, Joseph wants to know, any talk around cooperatively owned cannabis businesses?
Yes. So
Thanks, Joseph.
we're really trying to push the community to understand this, because if we know just historically, most marginalized communities, most communities of color, most indigenous people have always had that kind of cooperative nature.
That's our nature.
Like,
yeah.
that's our nature.
Right.
Like when I say I have 72 first cousins and we work together, like, it's
normal.
Now, certain cities are gravitating towards that conversation faster than others. In the city of Los Angeles, when I presented, I still get the blind look on my on the face of people. But I know that in cities like Massachusetts and cities like San Jose, or not cities like Boston and Massachusetts and as a whole, they're talking about this cooperative model and what does it look like to ensure that, we have 5 owners, and the 5 owners are all putting in sweat equity, and they've ponied up X amount of dollars to get them to the space that they are. They're utilizing whatever government resources that are available as well, because most of these states are starting to realize, hey, we're collecting all this dough and it's pretty fucked up that we're laundering the money for our state and we're not giving it back to the communities who have bared the brunt. I'm super excited about cooperative models. Like, I'm waiting for them to expand the conversation in the San Fernando Valley, in particular where I live, so that some of my friends who come from those zones can participate, who want to push this conversation, because I think this is the only way that communities of color are going to be able to actively have a license and participate.
Yeah,
so we're talking about it. Like, we're talking
good.
about it and trying to get people like excited. We know that the former head of California Growers Association, Hezekiah Allen, is pushing a big initiative with that kind of cooperative model in Northern California with the growers. So we want to figure out, like, come on, guys, we have to have that kind of cooperative model when we manufacture. Like, we're going to get it from people who have co-ops, get our plant from them, then we're going to produce stuff the same way, and then we're going to make sure that the shops that our product sits in continues to foster the same values that we all have.
Right, and we all benefit so much more from cooperative enterprise, for sure. Are there any other questions? Is that Joseph's the only one that cares? Okay, is there anything that you want to like anyway, if somebody would like to get a hold of you, how do they do that? Find you on Facebook, on your personal page?
No, don't find me on my personal page and Facebook. I hope that somebody gave that information already, because I'm really...
Right, we're going to put it up again, but I want you, we're going to put it in the feed, but I want to be able to find you.
I think you can go to Smart Farm Research Group, or research.com. You'll be able to find me sitting there in particular with some of the social justice related work that I'm doing. You can also stay tuned, because we just got a 501c3 handed to us.
Awesome.
To be able to make more magic happen, and that will be the Social Impact Center .org. We're working on all of that because everything has happened so fast with people blessing us with this in particular.
You had mentioned you were doing some fundraising.
So the big thing is I'm part of the collective leadership of a national grassroots organization called Equity First Alliance. So we have about 40 people who've signed, 40 organizations that have signed our collective letter demanding social change and demanding an acknowledgement that this part of equity, justice, and repair needs to happen. We're going to be at South by Southwest next week, and right now we are fundraising, so you can go to equityfirstalliance.org and donate whatever you can, because we need
everything you send. We need
what anything that you can send. We need it donated. It's a 501c3, so
you get a little tax break.
We're legit, so it's not, you're just not throwing it out to the ethos, and people will be able to be connected with the work that we're starting to plant at South by Southwest, where John Boehner is going to be speaking with us next week.
Yay! So you're going to be up there with John. I really want John again. I want you to get your own sign. Cannabis medicine helps treat my. What's it helping you with, John? Huh? Or Why are you supporting cannabis? Let us know. We want to know. And if any of you would like these, My Health Freedom backslash at cannabis_patients on Instagram. You can download one for yourself. You can get out there in your community and you can start talking about the conversation of cannabis and not just how it's medicinal, but how it's also medicinal for our planet and how it's creating infrastructure in our communities. And all of us, the more all the states open up, and the soon we are going to be federally legal. So all of this money is going to come from this plant that's been in prohibition. How is that going to impact your community? How is that going to make your roads, your schools better? How is it going to destroy your community? Are you going to allow commercial farming of cannabis in your environment? Do you want to keep it clean? You want to keep Monsanto out of it? You have a voice. This is the beginning of the industry. This is the only time, and such an amazing thing that we are all experiencing. We are the foundation of what is coming. So everything that we set in place is going to be there for our children's children, our grandchildren. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we make our laws correct in ways that are inclusive of all of us, not just my wallet, okay? So if you want to hear me talk some more, you can find me at firebirdtouchtherapy.com, or you can go over to Happy Dog Cannameds, where we're going to soon see our little pup thing, that Facebook whatever about last week, but whatever, it doesn't matter. You'll see our dog soon. And don't forget, I support cannabis because it's sustainable on all aspects of life, okay? So y'all know me. I'm Robin. Thank you so much for taking your time. Share this, because the more we wake up as a people, my tagline is always wake up and die right. So you need to figure it out. If John Boehner is at the table talking about what's going to happen to your next 10 years of cannabis, then you need to be finding out too, okay? Don't let John decide for you. Don't do that. Make your own decision. Thank you.